You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, thanks for coming back to the show. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And once a month during this summer, it's going to be me, Mighty Blue, hosting the show. I'm on a kind of sabbatical, but as always, I keep coming back to our podcasting, and frankly, the book's taking a bit of a back seat. I guess I'm going to have to wait until there are 10 days in a week so that I can fit everything in. I want to record my thanks to Ryan, who hosts the show for the rest of the time. Ryan holds down a full-time job, yet he's still taking the burden off me, coming up with new ways to do the show. I always tell him this when we speak, but I want everybody to know how grateful I am to him for stepping in during this period. This week I'm bringing you a very quirky guest. I'm sure he'll admit it. Not least because he claims to be a full-time unicorn. But Jamey Mossengren, or Big Red, had such a great time with his buddies, the Minnesota Hikings, that his story reminded me of that old Keanu Reeves movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He has some really funny stories and a very unusual mode of transport on some trails. Jamey will be on in a moment. After Jamey, Katie Westling reports on her deliberately slow progress. Katie's nursing her way back to fitness by following rules she may have ignored earlier. She has an interesting take on relationships with others on the trail. Katie is on after Jamey. Finally, it's the second to last chapter of Larry Luxembourg's Walking the Appalachian Trail, where Larry and his friends reach the greatest mountain, Katahdin. So let's meet the only living unicorn I've ever interviewed. It's Jamey Mossengren, or Big Red. I'd like you to meet a pretty extraordinary guy, because I can almost guarantee you that this guy has done something you didn't even know was a thing. It's Jamey Mossengren, or Big Red. Hey Jamey, how are you?
Good, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And as I said, your hiking isn't all about hiking, is it? Tell us, first of all, what it is that you do for a living.
So I actually get paid to be a professional unicorn, which sounds kind of silly, but it's actually true. Probably one of the only people in the world. I actually have a unicycling, juggling comedy show that I do at fairs and festivals and travel around the world and try to make people happy.
So how does that make you qualified in any way for hiking?
I'm very active, and I actually do some of my hikes on the unicycle.
That is the thing. That is the thing, because I know that you did the AT as a regular hiker in 2019.
Yep.
Yet again, 2019, because I'm always talking to my members of the class of 2019. And of course, unicycling wouldn't be possible on the AT. So let's come to the AT later. But start off by telling us why you thought that unicycling a long trail would be a good idea.
You know, I don't even know why I came up with it. I was going through a divorce at the time, and I just wanted to do something, and just, I needed time by myself, and I heard about the Colorado Trail, and I'm like, that sounds like fun, and I knew that mountain bikes were allowed, and you could hike it or bike it, and I'm like, I bet I could unicycle it, and maybe be the first one to do it. And so I looked into it, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so that was my first ever hiking experience, and it was with one wheel.
So did you do any walking on that trip, or was it all on unicycle?
Oh, I did lots of walking. Yeah, most of the uphills I would walk. Even if I could technically ride, it just wasn't worth the effort. And worth falling and stuff. I rode most of the flats and most of the downhills, but most of the uphills I walked.
So you get up to quite a bit of speed then on a unicycle. I can only see that ending on one way, for me anyway.
That's the best thing about a unicycle is you can't go that fast. Like, you can't coast like a bike. So it's actually safer. It sounds silly and sounds dangerous, but it's actually safer because you go at slower speeds and you don't have handlebars to get tripped up in when you do fall.
Right. So, am I right in saying that you had fellow unicyclists with you on that trail?
That one I did solo, but then
right.
2 years later I did the Arizona Trail, and I convinced 2 other unicyclists to join me. So there was 3 of us wobbling along the trail.
They must have thought, everyone coming across you must have thought, that's like going, they're all looking around for April Fool or something like that. That's amazing. It really is.
The best part about having 3 is, you'd pass, one of us would pass, some hikers, and then, 5-10 minutes later, another one would be in there like, what, there's 2? And then the third one would come along and they'd be like, wow, is this a thing?
So have you made it a thing? Are you the only ones that you know who do this?
I was the only one that did the Colorado Trail. There was another guy that actually did the Arizona Trail before us. So there's 4 of us now that have done that.
So you can't be first. How about that? It's hard to believe that you weren't the first to do it.
Yeah. And then I know there's people all over the world that are doing it. Of course, not that many, but there's a handful that are doing it's called, I guess, unipacking. So instead of bike packing.
Unipacking. God. So what do you do? What are the differences? Joking apart, I'm only pulling your leg, obviously, and I think it's an amazing feat to have done that. So you obviously did a lot of hiking as well. What are the actual differences, apart from the obvious, the fact that you're on a bike? Are there differences in gear you have to take and so on?
It's a little bit different. I like it because it's in between biking and hiking. So it's, faster than hiking, slower than biking. I just like the challenge. I just like saying I did something crazy like that. And usually, I can say I'm the first and only person to do it, which in this day and age, like that's hard to find, things that haven't been done. So I kind of like that novelty aspect of it.
So where does a man who earns his living as a professional unicorn, which I still find that hard to believe, but yeah. So, what skills do you have in the circus that you've actually, not circus, what skills do you have that you bring to the trail?
I have a lot of unicycling hours under my belt. So, I can do a lot of different tricks. I can, go a long distance, and I compete with it worldwide usually when competitions are going on. And
oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? What does that look like?
So every 2 years they have the World Unicycling Championships in a different country. And, there's like 36 different competitions. So they have like off-road races, uphill, downhill, cross country.
Jeez.
They have indoor type stuff, like kind of ice skating with music and costumes. And then they have like street. So they have like this like skateboard park type terrain. And then they also have like distance. So they have the marathon and road races and track races and it's this whole little world that most people would never don't know it exists, but it's out there.
As you can tell, I had no idea at all. So basically, you're I think you call it Munipacked, Mountain Unicycle Bike Backpacked, the Colorado Trail, which is a long way.
Yep.
The Arizona Trail, I don't know, is that about 800 miles as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 800. Yep, you go through the Grand Canyon.
And the Oregon Timber Trail.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to leave your unicycle or your unicycle at home and actually hike the AT in the, or in fact, really, why did you go out into the outdoors? What were you looking for out in the outdoors that perhaps your job wasn't giving you?
Well, I just like being in nature. And like I said, for that first, my first adventure was mainly because I was going through a divorce and I just wanted to find myself and think about stuff, because in day-to-day life, like, you're always distracted with work and TV and friends, and you're always busy, and you never have time to just think and try to find yourself and kind of figure out what you want and what you need. And so I did that on the Colorado Trail, and it really, really, really helped.
Well, just talking about that for a second, because, one of the great things about having too much time on the trail or having a lot of time to think on the trail is that you can really work some things out. But one of the worst things about having so much time to think on the trail, you can drive yourself crazy, can't you? So what did you get? What did you actually get out of that then? What did it give you? Did it allow you to work through those issues and almost discuss them with yourself?
Yeah, it definitely did. It like, for example, my divorce, like I was just trying to figure out what went wrong, and through my adventure, I learned that I had to forgive my ex and myself, and I think that was the thing that was holding me back, was I didn't forgive myself for maybe not being perfect. And by the end of that trail, I was just like a new person. I was like, okay, I wasn't perfect, she wasn't perfect, and it just, I don't know, I just felt like a new person at the end. And
wow.
It was amazing.
It was that transformation. It was that transformation for you, was it?
It was, yeah. And then,
Wow.
after doing that, it was a challenge. It was fun. It was, you get all the emotions. And I'm like, I got to do that again on another trail. Next summer, what am I gonna do? And that's where it all started.
And isn't that amazing? I've talked to a lot of people who were there in 2019, and not that many in 2020. But aren't we lucky, you and I lucky, to have done it in 2019?
Oh man, I think the weather was perfect for like we started and ended. I swear we only had like 7 rain days, like the whole 6 months. Like where you really wet,
I started a month before you, mate. Trust me. We had some tough days in the early month, because I think you started the end of March.
End of March. Yep. 3, 2, 1. So we got super lucky with the weather, and just everything was just beautiful.
Yeah, and I guess it was fairly easy for you, unless I'm assuming wrongly. Is it fairly easy for you to take time off in the business that you do, or the work you do?
Summer's usually my busiest time, so I'm usually working at fairs and festivals all over Canada and the U.S. and traveling. And so actually it's really hard for me to take off the summer months. Spring and fall are a little more flexible, but
Sure.
It was a big commitment to actually do the AT, because that's 5-6 months of prime time work for me. And, but I just worked really hard the previous year and saved up a bunch of money and made it work,
Did you get the same experience on the AT as you got on those other trails, and you said you were a new person, so did that new person come to the Appalachian Trail?
Yes, but it was a totally different experience, because I actually started and ended the trail with 3 other friends, like my best friends.
Not unicyclists, were they?
Nope, they were actually two of them can unicycle, and that's how I know them growing up, is we all hung out together at the same club, and now we're best friends. And
I know that your trail name as an individual is Big Red. Great name. But tell us about the Minnesota Hikings, not the hiking. Great name. Who are the Minnesota Hikings then?
Yeah, so the Minnesota Hikings, so that's me and my 3 friends that started the Appalachian Trail together, and we all actually finished together the same day too, which the odds of that are just unbelievable, that to start together as a group and finish. And we came up with the Minnesota Hikings because it's kind of play with the Minnesota Vikings. But the only problem with that is now whenever someone types our name in Google or YouTube, is it always comes up with Minnesota Vikings stuff, and they have to click that fine print that says, "Did you mean Minnesota Hikings?" And so it's a bit harder for people to find. But it was a totally different experience because I was with friends and we were hiking together and having fun and playing bocce ball all the time. And
oh really? Oh nice.
Yeah, you can buy this like indoor outdoor bocce ball at REI for like $15, and they're super lightweight. And not every night, but most nights we get to camp and we'd play around and invite others to play with us sometimes and do teams, and it's just a blast. I highly recommend the old bocce ball set.
Well, funny enough, I think what I liked about when I talked to you before, you really took the time in your hike, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I remember back in 2014 meeting a couple of young guys. They were playing a card game, I think it's Catan or something like that, in a shelter. And they'd been there all day and all day the day before, because they were just sat there. They said, because look, it's a great view out of our shelter, and we like playing this game, and we're in no hurry to get anywhere. So did you get that? You get that feeling with the bocce ball? You just weren't in a hurry to get anywhere, even though you were spending quite a bit of time, getting towards Katahdin. Were you just kind of waking up every day and thinking, well, what are we going to do today? Or did you feel you needed to get miles in at a certain time?
We had to get miles in, but, not a lot. So we learned early on, someone told us the last person to Katahdin wins. And that we learned that's so true, because, if it takes you 6 months, that's great. But if you're running and rushing and do it in 3 or 4 months, that just means you have to go back to work and, the real world, a month or two earlier. So why rush it? Plus, of course, there's more chance of getting hurt and injuries. Yeah. And we just learned, a slower roll, and we took, a lot of zeros and just, made the most out of it, because it's kind of a once in a lifetime experience.
And as far as you know, was your experience the same as the other guys? Did they all feel the same way about it? Because, when you hike with a team, you have to kind of work together and agree together, don't you? So or were you all on board with the same idea?
We were, for the most part, but of course, we would go our separate ways. So we didn't always hike together, every minute of the day. Sometimes I wouldn't see someone for a day or two, and then we'd catch them. And one of the guys went to New York for a week, so we didn't see him for like 2 or 3 weeks, because it took him a while to catch up. And so it was kind of fun, because sometimes we'd camp all 4 together, sometimes 2 and 2, sometimes 3 and 1. So like the dynamics kind of changed, week by week, which was kind of fun.
And I think I'm right in saying that the Hikings at one stage drafted somebody else, didn't they?
Yeah, we actually drafted a couple teammates onto our team. One of them was Cheese Curd, and he was from Wisconsin, of course.
Oh, really? Who would have guessed?
Yeah, so he was kind of a rivalry, but he was really nice, and we thought, why not? Invite the enemy onto our team, and then another Slim got drafted on the team, and there was a couple other people along the way. So we had a pretty big tramline by the end when we finished.
You didn't all wear Viking shirts, did you?
No, but that would be nice. That would be that would be fun. Yeah,
that would be cool. Yeah,
we could have our trail names on the back of everyone, and that's a great idea.
And of course, a lot of people who listen to this show have either done the trail or part of the trail, and they all know that trail magic can be quite a big thing, particularly early on the AT, but you've got a particular opinion about trail magic, even the name of trail magic, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, one of the highlights on the trail is trail magic, hands down. But early on, I never liked that name magic, because I'm actually a magician too on the side and do tricks, and magic is kind of it's a trick. It's like you're fooling people. It's not real. It's make believe. And trail magic it should be called trail love, because it's the love of these people that are coming out there and giving you food and water and beverages, and it's their heart. It's not a trick, it's not magic, it's actually a real thing. And I think trail love is a better name. And I actually tried to change it on trail, but it's already kind of set in stone. So
trail magic you're never going to change that, I don't think so.
No.
So now you've thought about that, and you're right, it is love. People do love this. What is it you think about hikers and the trail that makes people do this trail love then? Why do you think it is, from your observation?
That's a good question. I think humans are kind at heart, and especially if they've already done the trail, I think they want to give back, because they receive so much love on their hike, on their adventure. So I think a lot of it's just past hikers trying to pay it forward. And right now, actually, one of the Minnesota hikings, Count and Wizard, two of them, they're both in Georgia right now doing trail magic, and they went down for like 2 weeks just because.
Trail love.
Yeah, trail love, yeah. And they just went down because, they want to give back. So it's, I think it's really rewarding when you're actually doing trail love and you're seeing these hikers and you're making them happy. And I think it makes, the people giving it just as happy as the people receiving it.
I think you're probably right, and I remember almost shaking my head, especially in 2014 when I went first. I didn't know what to expect. And you think to yourself, there must have been a lot of preparation in putting together what you've put together here. And, people are so appreciative of it as well. You don't want to take too much, but at the same time, you don't want to go short, do you?
Right.
When people give you food. But it's more than that. And you actually told me one of the very, very best trail love stories that I've ever heard. So I'd love you to share. Yeah, I think that's a great one. So tell us that. It's amazing.
So yeah, one of there is lots of highlights with trail love and stuff on the trail, but one of the best was me and Count were hitchhiking to town one day, and we hitched back to the trail, and this guy said hop in the back of his pickup truck, so we did. And when he dropped us off, he was like, hey, I have a house. In a couple of days, you'll kind of walk right past it. It's a mile off trail. He's like, if you want to, stay there or shower or, do whatever, hit me up. And so he gave us his phone number, and we're like, okay, cool. Maybe not. We'll see. And then, sure enough, a couple of days later, we were hiking, and it was a rain day, and it was just like we were all wet and miserable. And we got halfway through the day, and we realized, we're like, hey, this guy's house is like coming up in like an hour or two. Like, let's see if we can swing by and, maybe dry off and, do some laundry and maybe stay the night. And so we sent him a text, and he got back to us. He's like, I'm not home. The door's unlocked. Make yourself at home. And we're like, awesome. And then it turned out we were with like 7 people at that time. And I'm like, is 7 okay? He's like, yeah, the more the merrier. So we're like, oh, sweet.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we get to the road, and then we find his house, and we go inside, and we all start taking showers and doing some laundry, and then he shows up at like 5-6 o'clock with a case of beer, a bunch of like hamburger meat, and he's like, hey guys, here's some stuff for you guys to make burgers. Have fun. I'm going to go to my girlfriend's tonight, so you guys can just do what you want. Have a good night. And we're like, wow, awesome. Thank you. So, of course, we make the burgers, and like he had this huge collection of records, like a record player with all sorts of fun albums. So we were like playing good music and playing some card games and just having the time of our lives. And a couple other people on trail actually heard that we were there, and so
that's always that bit when you tell me that before, that's always dangerous to me. So you did you know these other people?
Yep. They were kind of our family. Okay. Yeah, they were our family, and sure. Word spreads fast on the trail. So we asked the guy, we're like, can a couple more people come? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. So we ended up having like 12 or 13 people there that night, and it was just so much fun. And then we woke up the next morning, and we had such a good time that we're kind of cleaning up and packing up, and someone out of the blue said, hey, do you think he'd let us stay another night? And I'm like, that might be pushing it, but we can ask. And so I sent him a message. He's like, that's totally fine. I'm actually gone all day today, so the house is yours again. Just, have fun. And we had another great night, and I just can't believe like a random stranger would just let us have, his whole house, and he trusted us, and
yes.
It was it's amazing.
Was he a hiker himself?
I don't think he was ever a through hiker. I think maybe he did sections maybe, but
I suppose he'd met hikers, so he knew what to expect. And this I think is the point that I like to make about it. I'm guessing that he took some sort of stock of you guys, and thought they're decent guys, and he trusted you, and he trusted
Right.
you, and my guess is that you didn't abuse that trust either.
No,
I'm sure you
no,
left it
not
as
at all.
best you possibly could.
Oh,
Yeah.
like when we got there, the house was clean and stuff, but when we left, it was perfect. Like we left, we cleaned everything, washed and made it look super nice. And we actually even left them a bottle of whiskey as a thank you, and I think a bottle of wine or something.
That's
Because
so cool.
we got to go to town and buy some more taco stuff for the next night. So yeah, we definitely made it worth his while. So when he returned, he'd be like, oh, well, that's super cool that they
What a great
left
gesture.
it
Yeah.
like this, and gave a little gift and a little
Love
thank
that.
you, and
I love that.
we all signed a card and stuff. So
That's very cool. Now, I know that you did have a fall and an injury in New York, but you certainly made the best of the rest that you had to take. You had to rest for 3 days, didn't you? Where did you rest?
yeah, so going into the border of New Jersey and New York, I think it is. It's really rocky, and it was downpouring storm, just thundering lightning, and I just slipped off of a cliff and fell down 8-9 feet and
Wow.
and twisted my ankle. The worst part was I landed in a red ant pile, so I'm sitting there like in pain. It's pissing down with rain, and then all of a sudden like things start biting me. I'm like, what? So I had to like scoot away, and I'm like taking off all my clothes, trying to get all these ants off of me,
Oh, dear.
and just shaking my head. I'm like, wow, when it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
And then, but the good thing was I hobbled to the road, and we actually had a trail angel nearby, Peach, and she was able to come pick us up and bring us to the drive-in movie theater. And they let campers stay there for free and watch movies, and it's super cool. And so we stayed there for the night, and I ended up staying three nights, and I watched all the movies, and it was a perfect spot because it was free. The grocery store was just right around the block, and I thought I was done. I thought it was swollen, it got super swollen, and I was all bummed out, and then I just did the ice thing, rested it, iced it, elevated it for a couple days. And it went down, and I could kind of hobble, and I'm like, I think I might be okay. And I got back on trail, and luckily my teammates waited for me and slowed their roll. And so we just took it easy the first couple days, and I don't know how, but my ankle somehow healed itself within, a couple days, a week.
Remarkable. Is that those moments when you fall, there is that instant you think, is it over? Am I going to have to finish? But the fact that you were able to recover, that's terrific. Now, you've already said about the expression, the last person to Katahdin wins, and that is so darn true. And you're with your mates, you're having a great time. So it must have been a particular blast to summit Katahdin with the Minnesota hikings. Tell us about that last day.
It was so fun just being with everyone, being with the group. We're just having fun, smiling, telling jokes, remembering things as we hike up, and then we get to the top, and it's just like we did it. We did it as a team. You get all the emotions. Like you're happy that you're done, but you're kind of sad that you're done. You're excited, you got all these mixed emotions, and
also terrified you got to go down again, haven't you? Because that was a nightmare going down.
Definitely going down was harder, I think.
I agree. It took me longer to go down than it did to go up there.
Right.
So was it, because some people, and I find this hard to believe, but people have told me, and they mean it, that they felt kind of numb when they touched the sign. They didn't have those emotions and so on. Did you all feel the same thing? And, was there this collective sigh of relief?
I think we all felt different, similar but different. It's hard to say how they felt, but I definitely had, all the emotions going on, and I actually had a flight to catch in a couple days to see my girlfriend in Australia, like meet her down there. So I was sad it was done, but I was excited to be done so I could go see her and, go on another adventure,
So you were putting miles in towards the end, because you did have a timeline in the end, did you?
I ended up having a timeline towards the end, which I kind of regret now, because it rushed us towards the last couple of weeks. So we had to go a little faster than we wanted to. And it just put a lot of kind of, not stress, but it just changed the dynamics a little bit. It wasn't as laid back. And so I would not recommend having a deadline. I would just, tell people just hike, go slow, go your pace, and, don't have a finish line, because it definitely changes things,
Yeah. And you talked about how the other trails were transformational, and the AT was the last of those so far. Does each trail give you something different now, or do you look for different things within a trail?
Each trail I'm in a different frame of mind because of what I'm doing with relationships and my life and work. So each trail is just totally different, and I look for different things depending on, if I have a girlfriend, or if I'm going through the divorce, or if I'm single, or so it's like each trail is just so different from one another. Plus, of course, whether it's solo or with friends or with, people that you kind of know but don't know. So it's just like, it's every trail is just so different in so many different aspects.
I think that's interesting. The fact that you've done a solo through hike, even the Colorado Trail's 500 miles, and you've done a team through hike. You probably needed the solo hike to work your things out before, but did you notice a significant difference between how you approach each of those different hikes?
Yeah, I would say so. It's hard to say what though. It's hard to pinpoint what, but
because you're planning with other people when you're in a group, aren't you? I know that when I hiked with one guy, Trigger, in 2019, and I had to think about things, when he was around. But the couple of days we broke up, I could do whatever I liked, and that's interesting. But it's still just as great, by the way. I certainly wouldn't knock it by having a partner. I'm just saying that it's a different thing. You have to think about just yourself if you're solo. You have to think about your team, especially if there are 3 or even 4 of you as well. So I imagine that sometimes there are some compromises people are making there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I love doing what I want, so I like being by myself, and it's the freedom of having the choice of, I'm just going to stop here for the day, or I'm going to go there. But when you're with someone else or a couple other people, then you have to kind of figure out, well, I want to stay there, and someone else might want to stay somewhere else. And the good thing about that is you don't have to stay in the same spot. You can be like, okay, I'm going to stay here, you keep walking, and I'll see you in a couple days. So you still kind of have that freedom a little bit, but it's definitely different. And
I know that you're heading out again very soon, in fact. But in fact, by the time this airs, you may very well already be on your way. What's your plan?
3 of the 4 Minnesota hikings are going to start the Pacific Crest Trail on April 4th. Ooh. And we're all...
Please tell me you're walking. Please tell me you're just hiking it.
We're just hiking it, yeah. The no wheels are allowed, unfortunately. And we're not going to do mules or horses.
Well, you'll have a blast with that one as well, I'm sure.
We're so excited. We're just pumped. I'm actually at REI right now in the parking lot because I got to go buy a bunch of stuff.
Cool, Chef.
Get ready.
Well, look, Jamey, I'm so glad we connected and you come on the show. Tell us about it. You're the only unicyclist I've ever interviewed. I've done 260 odd shows, so I wish you well with your hike with the Minnesota hikings, and hope you come back and tell us how it went later in the year.
We hope to finish, and I don't know if people want to follow us. We're going to try to put out some YouTube videos once a week.
Cool.
Just look up MN Hikings and make sure you click that did you mean the Vikings? Or you gotta
What
click the small fine print.
I'll get from you the links, and I'll put those in the show notes so people can just click on the links in the show notes, okay?
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much.
Okay, man. Well, have a great time. And I say, hopefully we'll speak when you get back, when you've completed it.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Steve.
Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Funny bloke, eh? He actually encapsulates much of what the trail should be about. He's very present in his adventures, enjoying the journey and not focusing too much on the destination. Looking at some of the videos on his YouTube channel, the Minnesota Hikings are having a sort of Bill and Ted 2, quirkily telling their story of their PCT thru-hike. Check them out. I've got the links in the show notes. Before we hear from Katie, it's my usual catch-up with thanks for our donors who help keep these shows coming. By the way, when I return full-time to the show in October, I'm going to be introducing a Patreon account. I've resisted it over the years, but I want to give back to those of you who support me. More news of that in the future. This week, thanks go to former guest on the show, Steve Ortiz, and to William Matthews and Jens Lipperheider. Jens has donated before. Thanks, guys. Another new individual donor is Austin Dufresne, and I wanted to read out a comment that Austin made with his donation. He said, "Thank you, Jester, for making such great content and being an advocate for the trail. It's nice to hear that listeners to our other shows appreciate what the network is putting out." Finally, this week, monthly donors Michelle Brown, Jessica Diaz and Vicky Thomason have continued their much appreciated support of our efforts. Thanks to one and all. Now, Katie, as you've heard, she's back on the trail and taking, almost literally, baby steps. Let's hear how her rehab is going. Here's Katie. So we're back on with Katie, and she's actually just called me or texted me. She's on some rocky outcrop, and she's got one bar of service. The reality of recording. How are you?
I'm good, Steve. It's beautiful. You can really see a valley and the ridges and the haze and the fog in the distance. Pretty lovely. Yeah.
So that part of the hike is kind of fulfilling a lot of your ambitions. I know it is, what you're seeing and stuff. But obviously you're still trying to ease yourself back into it. Have you been on the trail all week?
It has been a week. And the last week I did 28 miles. And that was a good, I was really trying to take it slow, just carrying my day pack. And so today I'm going 8.4, and I'm a little over 5 now, and I have absolutely no knee pain.
Wow.
So,
how about that?
Yay!
How about that? So you've really nursed it. You've really nursed it this week then, haven't you?
I really have. And I feel like, I'll be curious to see, but even by the end of last week, I mean, it was rare that I was just aware of it, but not painful. So, and now I have been paying attention, but there's like no pain. Yeah. So really happy about that.
Sometimes I notice that something hurt me all the time, like literally all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So
sure.
when one thing hurts, it takes over the pain from somewhere else. How about the rest of your body? Are you physically feeling good in general terms?
I am. It's just that general fatigue of trying to build your endurance back up. Sure. So, but other than that, I mean, there's no pinpoint. It's just, your muscles are tight and a little sore, but really pretty good. Really, yay.
So you're in Shenandoah, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Still no bears?
Hey, well, I've seen evidence.
Oh, well,
I can send you a picture.
It's okay, I'm good. I got more pictures of bear scat than I can tell you. So I really don't need to see any more. Trust me. So what are you doing? When you meet people, are you tending to just chat and then go on and tell them you're hiking slowly, or and actually are you hiking slowly, or are you just doing shorter days?
So all for the past week I've done shorter days until I think Saturday I did like 7 miles, and
Right.
that was good. And I'm keeping about a 2 to 2.5 miles per hour. I've bumped it up to about 2.5 miles per hour over the last few hikes. So
That's not bad.
that's not bad, no. But
Yeah.
it's the Shenandoah, so
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. To
That's
be honest
easy.
with you, when I first started, I remember I was 1.5 miles an hour, and I was
Oh,
pleased
absolutely.
I did 1.5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Funny enough, the main guest on today's show is a guy, and obviously people, if they've listened to the show from beginning to end, would have heard it already. But this guy and his friends were hiking, and there was zero intention of moving in more than they needed to. They just wanted to just get out there and enjoy themselves. And I know you're doing that part of it. But you sent me a note, which I'm kind of interested in right now, which I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
You talked about making connections without attachment on long distance hikes. What do you mean by that?
So, okay, this is an example. Yesterday, I was sitting waiting for a shuttle, back to the trailhead where I started, and this guy, young man in his 30s, walked past me, and we looked at each other, and we said, "We know each other," and we had started the first day in Georgia together, and hiked on and off for about 3 weeks, and then he took off. He just kept going, and so it was just we sat for a little while. He stopped hiking, he sat with me, and we just talked, and it was we were both so thrilled to connect and to see, like I was so happy to see he was doing well. He was glad that I was able to get back on. We talked about various hikers we had met and what they were doing now. So there was that connection. And then I think about, in the beginning and what made me get, what brought me to where I am right now with trying to rehabilitate this was making a connection, but then taking that and creating such a strong attachment, say, to my tramway or my hiking partner, that I was willing to, overlook what my goals were.
Compromises your own hike. It compromises your own hike,
right.
doesn't it?
Exactly. And so, you would think that I would have the wisdom. I would have had the wisdom by this point in my life.
Yeah, wisdom is vastly overrated, by the way.
But it's true. The trail kind of just gives you a little smack and something that says, it takes something, an idea that you get intellectually, which is, these strong attachments that might not really be that healthy for you, and then it makes it visceral. So it makes it so you really get it. So that's kind of where I am.
The trail is
where
always
I am right now.
My buddy Clay always says the trail is the teacher. It teaches you what you can and can't do, doesn't it, really? It's not something you're ever going to be able to take on. It will put you in your place straight away. So now you're back then. So what would your attitude be towards hiking with other people? Because while you're going lesser miles, it's obviously not going to be possible to have a tramway, I suspect. Right. But now you've started to increase. How will you approach that when people are, say you get up to 12, 15 miles a day? How will you approach that going forward, do you think?
I think I just want to enjoy the connections and not, to recognize, to be mindful enough to recognize when that connection may go into, an attachment that's going to be kind of contraindicated or contrary to what my goals are and my own body and what it needs. So, Have
you been surprised at the physical impact the trail had on you?
A couple of things. So one is, in the beginning, I was so thrilled that my body was doing what I wanted it to do. And I was thrilled with the opportunity to push it a little bit. But then, going back to that attachment, I was willing to do more, push it too much so that, I broke it. I broke it. So, I love the physicality. I love the physicality of the hike, and, coming out here, I am sweaty right now. And, I was huffing and puffing up that last summit, but I love that. But I also have to be aware enough of my own body to know that, it's an older body and I need to give it the breaks and the resting in between, even little micro resting to let it have time to recover.
So what have you replaced that connection with people with? Is there something in the hike now? Because I know you were looking forward to seeing the flowers and so on. Is that been enough for you, or are you starting to get lonely? I mean, how are you feeling about it now?
I'm not lonely. I don't feel lonely. But I will tell you, when I see other hikers, especially, someone who I either knew about before, whose name I recognize, or,
Sure.
From the trail, or like the young man who I'd hiked with for about 3 weeks.
Sure.
It's joyful, and I love that connection. I love to chat and just share this awesome linear community. So that's what I find joyful, and I love the opportunity to be out here. So this time I'm hoping I'm smart enough to do it right. I do. I hope I'm.
Don't you feel one of the things about the trail, isn't it wonderful how it teaches, is humbling in many ways. It teaches you're not as smart as you thought you were, doesn't it?
That's right. Exactly.
So what is the actual hiking been like, though? I mean, have you enjoyed Shenandoah personally? Because I know that a lot of people thought it was pretty blah, Shenandoah. I loved it. I think it's a lovely place.
I love the Shenandoahs, and I've lived in Virginia for over 20 years, so
Sure.
To me, it's iconic, and it has so much history, both natural history and then history surrounding
Yes.
the United States.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I love it. I love its soft rolling hills and being able to look in the distance and, see ridge after ridge after ridge, of soft hills. So, yeah.
You are soon going to have it a little bit tougher, obviously. And I can't recall what happens after Shenandoah. I know there's Bear's Den and the roller coaster in your future sometime. Are you going to do that before you flip up to Harper's Ferry or what?
No. My hope is I'm planning to just keep going. I'm planning to. So my plan is to finish out this week by slowly adding weight to my pack,
right,
and then continue adding more weight next week. Watching the knee, see how it does once I start adding the weight back in.
Sure.
And then once I get to Front Royal, I think, or somewhere around Front Royal, my plan is to just go, and start back off the miles a little bit, but with a full pack, and
then
just
build up
keep
from
going.
there. Yeah, so you build up from there, obviously. And now I'm not wishing this at all, obviously, but if you start feeling it again, do you have you got a thought process that you're going through right now, thinking, well, if this happens now, I know I can't do this right now. So, you can't help thinking about it. Once your knee has expressed a weakness, then that weakness is always going to be in your mind, isn't it? Or have you?
It is
strong
always
enough
in my mind.
Oh, right. So I wonder whether you've got the mindset to say, I'm just going to push on through it, because pushing on through it sometimes isn't the best thing to do, is it?
No, it's not. And I think success is going to come in not letting it get to that. Not letting it hit that level, and just allowing my body to build up. Frankly, doing the work that I should have done and showing the reserve that I should have done early in my hike by allowing myself to build up. It's funny in not ha-ha sort of way.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting to reflect, though? You know, you've listened to the show, I believe, over the years, and people have always said probably the best advice they can give is to not push yourself, particularly in those early miles and so on. It took you an injury to prove the validity of that, I think, didn't it? That's
right. And 4 weeks off the trail. So,
yes, that didn't help either, did it?
You either go slow in the beginning or you end up, you're still, it's still going to have to happen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, look, I'm glad you're still out there. I'm glad you're getting some miles under your belt. And now if you're increasing today to 8 miles, that's a great little target to have. And hopefully you'll still be on next week and we'll be able to catch up again.
Excellent. Sounds great, Steve.
Okay, then. Thanks for calling. Thanks for letting me know you're on a rocky outcrop.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Cheers, then. Bye. You've got to admire her spirit and her determination. The fact that she now feels no pain is encouraging, but as we all know, there are plenty of miles to go. Let's hope she keeps progressing bit by bit. Finally today, Larry Luxembourg has reached Katahdin, that majestic mountain that looms as you approach it. Ryan will see you next week. Main Yak. Katahdin, the holy mountain at the end of the trail. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I got to the last place, so I did both. Steve Bruce, 1984 Trail Report to ATC. There are many places to finish the Appalachian Trail, but only one place to complete it, Katahdin. Having Katahdin at the end of the trail is almost like it was a plan by the creator of the universe, said Irvin Buzz Cavally, superintendent of Baxter Park since 1971. If there is one regret of people who do the trail southbound, in bits and pieces or flip-flopping, it is that they didn't end at Katahdin. Roby Jumpstart Hensley said, "There's something magical about Katahdin from the time when you first start counting the miles. It's my Shangri-La, the end of the rainbow. I lost a little of that feeling when I flip-flopped, then I had to look at Harper's Ferry as my goal." An unsigned article in the Myron Avery collection at the Maine State Library entitled Katahdin, an Inspiration, says, "I dwell in the shadow of Katahdin, Maine's superlative mountain. If the concept of a wilderness can be reduced to any specific illustration, it is probably best typified by the impression of its lonely mountain, reached only by a long journey through the wilderness. This is the meaning which Katahdin has had through the centuries for those who journeyed to its summit." The common translation of Katahdin from the Abenaki Indian language is greatest mountain, and arguably it is. When Dorothy Hanson was deeply discouraged during her thru-hike, her father wrote to her, "Remember, there's no holy grail at the end, it's just another mountain. But there is a holy grail at the end for a lot of people," she said. The year that Dorothy hiked, entries in registers of shelters for hundreds of miles discuss whether many thru-hikers missed the point of the trip because they were too goal-oriented. They hiked 25 miles a day, trying to reach the end too quickly. And in the process, some suggest, they don't enjoy the trip. Someone wrote that the ultimate test of whether a thru-hiker is hiking the trail for the right reasons, for the journey rather than for the end, will be to hike to Katahdin Stream Campground, reach the base of Katahdin and quit without climbing the mountain. That way, you would see if you did it for the journey or for the goal. "I don't think I would have been constitutionally capable of doing that," Dorothy said. "There were times when the only thing that kept me going was the thought of standing there on the top of Katahdin." In 1972, after hiking from Georgia to Maine, Lowell Nottingham was halfway up Katahdin when he decided to turn around, saying, "There will be nothing to look forward to" if he completed the climb. The 18 News reported that 1988 thru-hiker Darrell Binney stopped at Able Bridge, 15 miles from the finish. His dog, Jansen, had come with him the whole way, and because his dog couldn't enter Baxter State Park, he didn't want to either. "I couldn't imagine climbing Katahdin without you," he told Jansen. Katahdin is exactly a mile high, counting the 13-foot stone cairn there. The AT has higher mountains, but none as impressive. It towers over the landscape for miles. Millinocket, the closest town for AT hikers, is only 500 feet above sea level. An early guide to the AT, written by Myron Avery, describes Katahdin as a huge massif, appearing different from every direction. He wrote, "The casual climber, who thinks he has seen all after he reaches Baxter Peak, knows little of the wonders of Katahdin. It is a mountain not for a one-day's trip, but for many days, and to which the traveller must return again and again with increasing pleasure and enthusiasm. Katahdin is also the centrepiece of Baxter State Park, which must remain forever wild by the terms of a gift from Governor Percival Baxter to the people of Maine. Besides money, Governor Baxter inherited from his father, who had been the mayor of Portland, a sense of public service and philanthropy. For more than a decade he tried to convince the state legislature to protect Katahdin and its environs. Finally, he decided that he would have to do it himself. Over the next 4 decades, he pieced together dozens of acquisitions, 200,000 acres in all. Describing his efforts in a March 1931 letter announcing his initial donation to Katahdin, Baxter wrote, "It has long been my ambition to have the state of Maine own Mount Katahdin, for to my mind that mountain is the grandest and most beautiful of all the natural attractions of our state." A decade before, on January 27, 1921, while serving as president of the Maine Senate, Baxter gave a memorable description of Katahdin in a speech to the Maine Sportsmen's Fish and Game Association. The scenery of the White Mountains in New Hampshire is tame and ordinary when compared with that of Mount Katahdin and the range beyond, and Katahdin is not unworthy of a place among the great mountains of the world. The grandeur of the mountain, its precipitous slopes, its massive cliffs, unusual in formation and wonderful in colouring, cannot be surpassed or even equalled by any mountain east of the Mississippi River. As a condition of his gifts, Governor Baxter stipulated that the park shall forever be left in the natural wild state, shall forever be kept as a sanctuary for wild beasts and birds. In a 1944 speech he described acquiring the land and setting up the park as his life's work, and he continued, "The works of men are short-lived. Monuments decay, buildings crumble, and wealth vanishes. But Katahdin, in its massive grandeur, will forever remain the mountain of the people of Maine. Throughout the ages it will stand as an inspiration to the men and women of the state." It is one thing to decree wilderness, it is another to interpret that vision, especially decades later. Making the park accessible to some recreation has meant building campgrounds and some primitive roads. How much recreation to allow remains a point of contention. In 1993, the Park Authority voted to continue the ban on motorcycles, and one commissioner suggested that the day should come when no motor vehicles are allowed in the park. If anyone else has ever loved Katahdin as much as Governor Baxter, it was Myron Avery. It was probably inevitable that 2 strong, opinionated men who loved Katahdin would eventually differ on how to protect it. At first, Avery welcomed the donation. He wrote a letter to Baxter, calling it a very generous and far-sighted act. By 1933, proposals were surfacing to make the area a national park or forest. Avery favoured federal intervention. He worried that Baxter's initial donation did not include enough land to adequately protect Katahdin. He worried also that the state wouldn't adequately fund park maintenance. But Baxter successfully fought the national park, and Katahdin stayed with the state. David Henry Thoreau has been closely linked to Katahdin in people's minds ever since his 1948 ascent, one of the first recorded climbs, although he failed to reach the summit. He popularised the area with an account called In the Maine Woods. Approaching Katahdin from the Abel Jack Najezik, Abel for short, he wrote, "Seen from this point, a bare ridge at the extremity of the open land, Katahdin presented a different aspect from any mountain I've seen, there being a greater proportion of naked rock rising abruptly from the forest. He found it certainly the most treacherous and porous country I ever travelled, and so wild that the tracks of moose covered every square rod on the sides of the mountains." In a further description of Katahdin, Thoreau captures what may be the distilled essence of the Appalachian Trail itself. The mountains seemed a vast aggregation of loose rocks, as if sometime it had rained rocks, and they lay as they fell on the mountainsides, nowhere fairly at rest, but leaning on each other, all rocking stones with cavities between, but scarcely any soil or smoother shelf. Ironically, Thoreau never made it to the top of Katahdin. He climbed a difficult route in a thick fog and remained well short of the summit. He waited a long time for his cloud factory to clear, but then decided to descend so he could catch up with his hiking party. As he walked down, the sky opened up and he got a magnificent view of the surrounding lake country. In his account, he said that one who earlier visited this spot compared it to a mirror broken into 1,000 fragments and wildly scattered over the grass, reflecting the full blaze of the sun. Frequently, this phrase has been incorrectly attributed to Thoreau. A 1993 article in the AT News by Eric Pinder traces it to an 1847 article in the Bangor Courier by J. K. Lasky. Arthur and Linda Belmont have been running the store and campground at Abel Bridge, the northern end of the 100-mile wilderness, since 1978. Linda finds that the hikers are grateful for the least little thing. The northbounders, who are within a few days of finishing their hike, are elated. They want to party. And she finds they've changed during their stay in the woods. One father, she remembers, walked right by his hiking son and didn't recognise him. Busy at the campground, Linda has been to Baxter State Park only once in all the 17 years she's been at Abel. Someday, when we move from here, I'm going to come back and see what the big draw is, she said. For months, as a thru-hiker heads north on the AT, people ask him where he's headed. He answers, Maine, and at first it seems as distant as the moon. Then, after months of walking nearly every day, in a little clearing he crosses over from New Hampshire, and the end no longer seems so distant. In a few weeks, Katahdin appears as a small speck on the horizon. For more than 100 miles it continues to grow until the huge massif is straight ahead. Many thru-hikers spend their final night on the AT at Dacey Pond, with Katahdin looming large over the water. From there, it's a flat 2-mile walk to the base of the mountain. Sharon, April Fool Rise, came upon a high school outing on one of the mountains in Maine. I went by them and they asked me how far I was going. I said I'd done the whole thing so far, and they stood up and gave me a standing ovation. Expressing the ambivalence many hikers feel at the end of their hike, Roby Hensley wrote, "The weeks seem to pass so quickly. I'm anxious to get home, yet I regret leaving this trail I've grown to love. I felt sort of finished and sort of not really finished," said Ken Miller, who thru-hiked in 1989. "Now what do I do?" That was a question most of the people up there were asking. At Katahdin, "I was really sad," said Jen Sacagawea Collins. "I didn't want it to end. You're either elated to be there or sad to have it end. I had pictures of people crying on the top. People were sitting on the knife edge, contemplating the trail. We arranged a picture with arms up in triumph, but it was a prop. They were so sad." The first time she completed the thru-hike at Katahdin, Ginny Spirit Walker Frost felt pure happiness and utter euphoria. Until that time, I had never been that happy in my life. The second time, she was a little sad because it was the ending of a lot of really good things. For Frank, the Hawk Logue, climbing Katahdin at the end of his thru-hike was, without a doubt, the best morning of my life. He and his wife Victoria, the Dove, and Peter, M&M Seal, had decided on a pre-dawn climb to finish their 1988 thru-hike. As they crossed the tableland, a mile from the summit, a cloud covered the very top. As we approached the summit, the cloud exploded, Frank said. 2 minutes later, the sun appeared. It could not have been more perfect. John Oliver Twist, Newman, completed the trail in 1989 with Noel, the singing horseman, to Cavalcanti. "I felt elation, sadness, regret it's over," John said. "My big emotional moment was at Rainbow Deadwater. All of a sudden, everything hit me. My dad had died in 1982. I started the trail in 1983. I started crying. I could not stop. It was so bad, I couldn't even see the trail. The journey was dedicated to the memory of my dad. Every day, I thought how much he would have enjoyed the trail. At Rainbow Deadwater, I felt I'd done the whole trail. At Baxter Park, I changed from a few days before. Nothing would have stopped me then. I would have carried Noel, or Noel would have carried me." Profile: David Field. In the AT community, it takes a lot to stand out as being exceptionally devoted to the trail. David Field clears that hurdle with ease. A fast-talking professor of forestry, his exuberance for the trail is contagious, and few people have had as much to do with charting the current route of the trail in Maine, which most thru-hikers consider the finest stretch of the entire AT. David Field is a different type of 2,000-miler. For 36 years he's been maintaining the same stretch of trail on Saddleback Mountain and building shelters and relocating trails throughout Maine. Added up, his trail work hikes in Maine alone have totaled well over 2,000 miles. A former president of the Maine Appalachian Trail Club, MATC, and a current ATC board member, his roots go back 11 generations in Maine. Since at least 1804 his ancestors have lived near the base of Saddleback. He's a direct descendant of Darby Field, who in 1642 was the first person recorded as having climbed Mount Washington, one of the outstanding exploration and mountaineering feats of the 17th century. After 36 years of clearing the trail on Saddleback, you acquire a proprietary feeling towards it, David Field said. You're personally embarrassed if the trail isn't in good shape. You feel bad if someone says something bad about it. It's sort of a peer pressure thing, but it's more than that. I think I'd keep it in good shape even if there weren't any hikers there. There's a social angle to it, he added. You enjoy being out working with friends. I have friends in my hometown and I have people at work that I'm friendly with, but the closest friends I have are in the male Appalachian Trail Club and the Appalachian Trail Conference. Working with people for years and years, you really get close to them. As the E.L. Giddings Professor of Forest Policy at the University of Maine, David has combined his work and avocation all his adult life. His first job was with the Forest Service in the White Mountain National Forest at Gorham, New Hampshire, which to me was hog heaven, right in the shadow of the presidentials. I love the woods, so the AT gives me an excuse to be out in the woods. Although David loves to hike, he's been so occupied with trail work that he hasn't even hiked all of the AT in Maine. I've always been intrigued by the idea of hiking the whole Appalachian Trail, but I've never seen any way to do it, he said. Nevertheless, he's been around. He's hiked stretches of the AT as far south as Springer. He was overseer of the trail in western Maine for 10 years, and he's hiked that 120-mile stretch regularly. He spent most of his time on the relocated sections of the trail. He's never hiked the barren Chairback Range, one of the trail's most remote sections, because it's still close to its original path. Every summer I say I'm going to do that, but there's only so much time. If you spend all your time working on the trail, there's no time to hike. As a teenager, David started doing trail maintenance almost by accident. A hurricane in 1954 hit Bigelow and other mountains in western Maine. He and his brother Michael noticed the damage while they were hiking. Bringing tools from home, they came back to clear the trail. In one day alone, they took out 250 trees that had blown down across the trail. They didn't know about the trail clubs, but they recorded what they did in a register at Horns Pond. Eventually, they received a letter from the MATC acknowledging all they'd done and asking if they'd like to join. David's roots at Saddleback go back even further. His hometown of Phillips is at the base of the ridge, and he first climbed the mountain when he was 8. Since then, he's been up the ridge more than 100 times. He has an old letter that refers to his great-grandfather who, after returning from the Civil War, would climb Saddleback to pick berries. His grandmother talked about climbing the mountain in long dresses and high-button shoes and sleeping there under a tarp in a thunderstorm. David gradually became more involved with the MATC. He became an officer in 1968 and served as president from 1977 to 1987. He first joined the ATC Board of Managers in 1979. In the mid-70s, the trail in Maine was poor, he said. Most of it was still on old logging roads and much of the rest was on land owned by a few large paper companies. To improve the route and protect the trail corridor, land had to be acquired. Eventually, 2/3 of the trail in Maine was relocated. New shelters had to be built along the new route. In 1978, the club built its first shelter without the uncomfortable, peeled pole floors. David recalls carrying boards up to that site. In the late 70s, David made a conscious decision that the main AT was where he'd make his mark in the world. I decided this is going to be it. I'm not going to be able to do other things because this is going to take so much time, he said. It took more time than I thought I was going to, a lot more. David still teaches at the University of Maine, where he served as department chair for 5 years. He also taught at Yale School of Forestry. His work in management planning and policy development for MATC and ATC fits right into his professional work. He teaches forestry management, economics and planning, and his research covers similar topics. Currently, he's studying the financial implications of forest biodiversity. His argument is that when you manage a forest for diversity of species, it is more profitable as well as biologically beneficial. The idea is that enlightened self-interest is going to accomplish more than regulation, so far as private forest lands are concerned. He finds the tentative results encouraging. What I've just described, he said, is portfolio theory, straight from the business school, but it goes back to folk wisdom. Speaking of his leadership style, David said, "More than a few times as president, I did things I thought needed to be done and didn't worry about the democratic process," he said. "I can get impatient. You just need strong leadership sometimes, or people sit around on their thumbs trying to decide what to do forever. So you say, okay, we're going to do it this way, and you go do it." Maine has always been a rugged, beautiful place for a trail. With its immense forests, pristine lakes, blueberries and moose, it's the favourite part of the AT for many hikers. There has been a steady stream of people willing to work hard to make that trail possible, but none have worked any harder than David Field. It took him a hurricane to get him on the trail and working 38 years ago. It would likely take more than that to get him to stop.